Chapter 1. This story starts in times of the end of the reign of King Richard I, who was imprisoned by the Norman noblemen. Poor Saxon people lived very badly and hoped to see their king and peace in the country. The sun was setting upon a large oak and birch forest that covered the hills and valleys between the towns of Sheffield and York. Two men were standing under the branches of the forest. The elder man looked wild. His only cloth was an old leather jacket from the throat to the knees and a leather belt with a horn and a knife on one side of it. Around his neck, he had a metal collar, like a dog's collar, on which was written, "Gurth, the son of Beowulf, is born a slave of Cedric of Rotherwood." The other man was 10 years younger and wore a bright purple jacket and a short yellow cloak. There was a cap with bells on his head. In his belt, he had a wooden sword. He also had a collar around his neck, on which was said, "Wamba, son of Witless, is the slave of Cedric of Rotherwood." Suddenly, the two men heard the sound of horses from among the trees behind them. A group of churchmen came riding up to the Saxons. The first was the rich Prior Aymer, who loved to have fun. Behind him was riding Brian de Bois Gilbert, a Norman knight and a Templar who looked very severe. "Can you tell us the way to Cedric the Saxon?" the prior asked Gurth and Wamba. Wamba told him how to get to Cedric's house and took the coin from the churchman. When the riders disappeared, Gurth turned to Wamba and said, "If they follow your directions, they will certainly not get to our master's house." Wamba laughed. "No, but they may reach Sheffield instead, which is a better place for them." While Prior and the Templar were riding through the forest, it soon became too dark for them to see the road clearly. They stopped to ask a man sitting by the side of the road for directions to Cedric's house. The man proposed them to show the way, and after a while, they arrived at Rotherwood, the house of Cedric the Saxon. "Who are you?" Prior Aymer asked the man, whose face was hidden by the hood of his robe. "I think you know this part of the forest well." "I am only a poor pilgrim who has just returned home from the Holy Land," answered the man, and they went inside together as it started to rain heavily. Chapter 2. Cedric the Saxon had a very unusual house. The hall of extreme width and length had a huge smoky fireplace and a great oak table in shape of letter T in the middle by which the master was sitting. Cedric was of medium height but very strong with wide shoulders, long arms, blue eyes and long fair hair. 3 big hunting dogs lay at his feet. His men sat on long wooden benches and ate their supper noisily. They knew that their master was angry and afraid because his ward, Lady Rowena, was late for supper and his swineherd and jester had not yet returned from the forest. He thought that Reginald Front de Beaulieu, one of his Norman neighbors, could do some harm to them. And here come Prior Aymer and that Templar, Brian de Bois Gilbert. Normans both of them," he said when the guests were announced. "But I know my duty as a host. Tell them that they are welcome at Rotherwood." Cedric invited the Prior and the Templar to sit beside him at the head of the table, but the pilgrim refused and had his supper standing by the great fireplace, away from all the other guests. When Gurth and Wamba came into the great hall a bit later, the Templar recognized them and became very angry. Suddenly another visitor came in. It was Isaac of York, an old Jew, who had been on his way to Ashby. Cedric welcomed the old man, but nobody allowed a Jew to sit down. Only the pilgrim offered the old man some food and drink by the fireplace. Chapter 3. At last, Lady Rowena came into the hall. Everyone stood up. She was a tall young woman with a beautiful face, clear blue eyes, fair hair and white skin. The Prior noticed that the Templar was staring at her Saxon beauty and warned him not to do so. Rowena sat down next to Cedric and saw the Templar's look. She was very confused. "What are the latest news from the Holy Land?" she asked the Templar. "Were there any knights who fought bravely at the side of our king?" added Cedric. "Yes, there were many very famous knights who fought with our brave king, but none of them were Templars. One of the knights with King Richard was young and brave, but I don't remember his name," answered the pilgrim. "I know who you mean," said the Templar angrily. "It is Wilfred of Ivanhoe. If he were in England now, I would call him to fight against me in the tournament at Ashby in a few days. If he were here right now, he would give this knight what he deserves," said Rowena. "Rowena," said Cedric, "let's not discuss these things now. Instead, everyone let us all drink a cup of wine in honor of Lady Rowena." Everyone raised their cups together with Cedric and cheered for Lady Rowena. Chapter 4. That evening, when the guests went to their rooms at Rotherwood, Lady Rowena was asking the pilgrim of the knight Ivanhoe. "What do you know about Ivanhoe? Is he all right? Is he going to come back?" "Yes, he is all right and he is going to return from Holy Land to England." When the pilgrim was passing the corridor, he heard some voices. "Unbelieving dog!" was saying angrily one of the voices, which belonged to the Templar. "So you're going to see the tournament at Ashby? I'm sure that you have a lot of money hidden away somewhere." "Money? But I am a poor old man. Even the clothes that I wear are borrowed from a friend," exclaimed the other voice. It was Isaac. "Liar." The Templar smiled and turned to say something in Arabic to his servants. Later that same night, Isaac woke up and saw the pilgrim near his bed. The pilgrim saw that the old man shook with fear and quickly said, "Don't be afraid, I have come to warn you. Your life is in great danger. I understand Arabic, and I heard the Templar told his men to kill you on the road to Ashby tomorrow. Let me guide you through the forest tonight so you can at least reach Sheffield safely." The two men then went to the next room, where Gurth, the swineherd, slept. "Wake up," the pilgrim said to Gurth. "Open the gate for me and the Jew, so we can leave Rotherwood tonight." Gurth was suspicious, but the pilgrim whispered something in his ear. Gurth looked surprised and stared at the pilgrim. "But you must not tell anyone what I have just told you," the pilgrim warned. Gurth hurried to open the gate and let the pilgrim and Isaac out. He even kissed the pilgrim's hand before they left. Wamba was surprised. "You can't always judge people by their appearance, Wamba," said Gurth, and they went back inside. At last, Isaac and the pilgrim came to the top of a small hill. The pilgrim pointed to the town of Sheffield below them in the valley and said to the old man, "Here we should say goodbye to each other." "No, let me thank you and pay you for your help," said Isaac. "I don't want anything from you," answered the pilgrim. "I think you need a horse and armor." The pilgrim was surprised by Jew's words. "Why do you think so?" asked he. "When you came to my room at Rotherwood, I noticed that you wore chainmail under your pilgrim's robe." Isaac quickly wrote some words on a piece of paper. "I have a rich friend in Leicester who will give you his best horse and armor if you give him this letter from me." The pilgrim thanked Isaac, and they said goodbye to each other. Then they went down to Sheffield by different roads. Chapter 5. In those times when the life was hard and the future unseen, people wanted to have fun. The rich and the poor, Normans and Saxons came to see the best knights who fought with each other at Ashby in the two-day tournament. The winner of the tournament would choose the Queen of Love and Beauty from among the ladies present. Isaac of York had come to see the tournament together with his daughter Rebecca, but neither the Norman noblemen nor Saxons wanted a Jew to sit next to them. Isaac knew that he had nothing to fear from the Normans, because Prince John, the younger brother of the king, who made this tournament, was borrowing a lot of money from the Jews of York. "That Jewess is very beautiful," Prince John said to Prior Aymer, who was sitting beside him. "She is," agreed the prior. "But, my lord, you must remember she is a Jewess." "Normans, make room for the Jew down in front of the gallery," Prince John shouted over to the Norman nobleman. "We are forgetting the Queen of Love and Beauty. I hope it will be that beautiful Rebecca." "That would really make the Saxons angry," told the prior. "A Jewess. Prior Aimer turned his eyes up in horror. If Boys Gilbert wins the tournament, I think I know who he will choose as the Queen of Love and Beauty. Prince John gave the signal for the tournament to begin. The first 5 knights rode forward to 5 challengers. The challengers, led by the Templar, rode to the opposite end of the lists. The challengers had knocked 4 of the knights off their horses. The second and third group of knights came to fight against the challengers, but they were no more successful against the Templar and his fellow challengers. When the crowd saw that there were only 3 knights in the fourth group, they became very quiet, and thought that the Norman challengers were going to win the day's tournament. Trumpet music was already being played in honor of the successful challengers, when suddenly an unknown knight in full shining armor rode into the lists. On his shield there was a picture of a young oak tree pulled up by its roots and the word Destachado, which was Spanish for disinherited. The knight had chosen Boys Gilbert as his rival. The 2 knights then rode to the opposite ends of the lists. When the herald's trumpet sounded, they galloped towards each other with the speed of lightning. Both of their lances broke at once. When they changed their lances, the Templar hit the center of the disinherited knight's shield, and he would have won the fight if his own stirrup hadn't broken. He was thrown off his horse, and he fell onto the ground. "We shall meet again where there is no one to separate us," said the Templar angrily and walked away. Prince John had no choice but to announce that the disinherited knight had won the first day of the tournament. Chapter 6. Prince John presented the war horse to the disinherited knight for his victory. "Sir Disinherited Knight," he said, "since that is the only name by which we know you, you may now choose the Queen of Love and Beauty," said the prince and gave the knight a golden crown. The disinherited knight rode straight to the Lady Rowena and laid the crown at her feet. "Long live the Lady Rowena, the Queen of Love and Beauty!" shouted the tournament crowd. After the fight, the knight had found Gurth and ordered him to take the bag of money and return them to Isaac in the town of Ashby. According to the tournament rules, the next day, the disinherited knight would lead one side of the fighters, and the Templar would lead the other side. When Prince John arrived, he led the queen of the tournament to sit beside him in the royal gallery. That time the knights were allowed to use not only lances, but swords and battle axes. If a knight had been knocked off his horse, he could continue fighting on foot, but a mounted horseman wouldn't attack him. When Prince John gave the signal, the fighting would stop. There were 50 fighters in each team. When the heralds blew their trumpets, all the knights lowered their lances and galloped towards the center of the lists. Firstly, the audience couldn't see anything because of the dust. When the sight cleared, half of the knights were lying on the ground. The mounted knights continued fighting with their swords, as their lances were broken. At last, the disinherited knight and the Templar were fighting with each other. Front de Beaulieu and Athelstane saw this too, and they rode up from behind the Templar to attack the disinherited knight from both sides at the same time. The knight hit the Templar while pulling his own horse back sharply, so Athelstane and Front de Beaulieu rode into each other between himself and the Templar. Then he rode to another side of the lists, turned his horse around and began to fight against all three knights with his sword. The noblemen around Prince John asked the prince to signal the end of the tournament because it was unfair. "No, by the light of heaven," replied Prince John. "This knight who hides his name has already won one prize. Now he should let others have their turn." Chapter 7. During the battle and the lists that day, there was a knight in black armor on a strong black horse who had started on the side of the disinherited knight. The audience thought he was very lazy and called him the Black Sluggard. When he saw that the leader of his side was in danger, he shouted, "Destachado, to the rescue!" and rode over to help the disinherited knight. With his sword, he struck Front de Beaulieu so hard on the helmet that the Norman knight and his horse rolled onto the ground. Then the Black Knight grabbed the battle axe from Athelstane and knocked the Saxon knight to the ground with it. Then the Black Knight disappeared of the lists. By this time, the Templar's horse had lost so much blood that it rolled to the ground. The Templar's foot was caught in one of the stirrups, and for a moment, he was unable to free himself from the fallen horse. The disinherited knight jumped off his horse and waved his sword over the Templar's head, ordering the Templar to surrender. Just at this moment, Prince John gave the signal for the battle to end. Prince John didn't want the disinherited knight to be the winner of the second day of the tournament. So, he suggested the winner should be the Black Knight, but the Black Knight could not be found anywhere, and Prince John had to announce the disinherited knight as the winner of the second day as well. "Disinherited knight," said Prince John, "we now announce you as the winner of the tournament for the second day. You may now receive your prize from the Queen of Love and Beauty." The disinherited knight rode over and got off his horse in front of the royal gallery. The Lady Rowena tried to place a crown on his helmet when a herald shouted, "This time he must take his helmet off." The disinherited knight tried to stop him, but he was too weak. The herald removed his helmet, and the crowd saw the blonde hair and bloody face of a young man of about 25. Rowena recognized him and cried out. Then, shaking, she placed the crown on his head. The knight bent down to kiss her hand but fell forward to the ground. The crowd cried out, and Cedric, who had been surprised at the sight of his banished son, rushed forward. Chapter 8. The heralds removed the armor of the disinherited knight and found the tip of a lance in his side. The name of Ivanhoe was heard everywhere. Prince John also heard it and said, looking around him, "My lords, I thought I felt the presence of one of my brother's knights." The prince was not happy to see Ivanhoe, as he gave his land to Reginald Front de Beaulieu. Prince John wanted his own royal doctor to take care of Ivanhoe, but found out that he had already been carried out of the lists by some of his friends. "Let's marry Lady Rowena to a Norman. What do you say, de Bracy? How would you like to have her in her land?" asked the prince, knowing that the woman was upset because of the Ivanhoe's injury. "She is very beautiful, and I would be happy to take her as my wife." "Well, then she is yours, de Bracy." Then a message was handed to Prince John by a servant. It was said that the king was released from his prison in Austria. At this time, the trumpets announced the start of the archery competition, and more than 30 archers took their places in the lists. Each archer shot 3 arrows at the target. At this distance, only 10 arrows hit the target, but a man named Hubert hit the center ring twice and was declared to be the best among them. Another archer called Locksley started to compete against Hubert. He asked to shoot at each other's target. Prince John agreed. Hubert placed an arrow on his bowstring, took the aim, stepped forward and drew the bowstring right back to his ear. The arrow flew through the air and hit the inner ring of the target, but not exactly in the center. Locksley came to Hubert and, standing beside him, shot an arrow so carelessly, it seemed he hadn't looked at the target at all. The arrow landed in the target a bit closer to the center than Hubert's arrow. Next time Hubert shot an arrow right into the center of the target. Locksley split Hubert's arrow right down the middle. Then Locksley proposed another target. It was a branch that was 6 feet long and as thick as a man's thumb. "I will not shoot at anything that I can hardly see from here," said Hubert, looking at the branch. Locksley, instead, released his arrow and split the branch. "You have won the archery prize," the prince said, "and I will pay you twice as much if you become my royal bodyguard." "Excuse me, noble prince," said Locksley, "but I have promised myself that I will never serve anyone, except your royal brother, King Richard. Give the prize to Hubert instead." Before Prince John could reply, Locksley disappeared into the crowd. Chapter 9. After leaving Ashby, the Black Knight was riding north through the great forest until it became too dark for him to see the forest road. Then he started to look for a place to spend the night. Soon he arrived to a little hut by a stream. The knight got off his tired horse and knocked on the door. "Go away, whoever you are," said a voice from inside. "Father, I am a poor traveler who is lost in this forest, and I would like to spend the night here." "Go away, you are interrupting my prayers." Just give me directions for the road, please. The road is easy to find. Go through the swamp, across the deep river, and then along the top of a cliff, answered the voice. Are you mad to give such directions at night? Open the door immediately or I'll break it down, shouted the knight and pushed the door strongly. Calm down, said the voice, and the door was opened. A fat monk who came outside looked angrily. When he saw the big man in armor in front of his hut, the monk politely invited the knight inside and said he had been afraid that it was an outlaw. The knight looked around the hut. You are so poor that outlaws cannot be interested in stealing something you've got in your house. The knight took off his helmet, and the monk saw his thick blonde hair and brave face. What is your name? The monk asked the knight. I am known as the Black Knight or the Black Sluggard. The monk smiled at this and offered the knight some water from the stream and dry bread. The Black Knight, who was very hungry, looked down at the food and back at the fat monk. I think there is some better food in this hut. The monk looked at the knight's face and went to get some better food and good wine. The Black Knight started eating and drinking while the monk watched. After a while, the knight invited the monk to eat with him as he had been in Palestine and people there had a custom to eat together. To make you feel better, said the monk, I will forget that I am a monk and join you. Well, you certainly are the most mysterious monk I have ever met, replied the knight, but soon they were happily eating, drinking and singing songs together. Chapter 10. When Cedric saw his son fall down in the tournament lists, he firstly wanted to come and take care of Ivanhoe. The servants could not find Ivanhoe himself as a rich lady from the audience had taken him away from the lists. Cedric became angry, and when he found out that Garth had gone, he became even angrier. He decided to return to Rotherwood that same evening together with the Lady Rowena and Athelstane. When the little group had traveled through the forest, they saw Isaac and his daughter with some mules on the road. Isaac quickly told them that he had paid some men to guide him, his daughter, and a sick friend through the forest, but the men robbed them. Slowly, the group continued their way together along the dark road, when they suddenly heard war cries from every side. A group of men dressed in green rushed out from behind the trees, escaped by running as fast as possible through the dark forest. Wamba suddenly heard a voice of Garth near him and told him what had happened. Let's rescue Cedric, said Garth. Follow me. Garth went to a man who also wore the green clothes of an outlaw. It was Locksley. Garth quickly retold the story to Locksley. Come with me, and we will rescue your master. The two men followed Locksley through the forest. Then, they came to a big clearing with a large old oak tree in the middle. There were 6 men. Locksley asked his men. Gather as many of our men as you can. 2 of you go to Front de Beauf's castle, Torquilstone, and watch it carefully. Some men dressed as us have taken a group of prisoners there. Meanwhile, we 3 will go and get the monk. Locksley took Girth and Wombat to the monk's hut. Locksley knocked on the door of the hut. The knight called Black Sluggard had put on his helmet as he heard the voice of Locksley. We need every one of our men, Friar Tuck, Locksley said to the monk when he opened the door. Locksley quickly explained the situation to the monk. Therefore, we are going to attack the castle of Front de Beauf, he said. I think you must be a friend of the poor and the weak. You are a friend of England. Will you help us attack Torquilstone? Asked he the knight. I will, replied the knight. But who are you? I am also a friend of my country, said the outlaw, and they set off together to meet the others back at the oak tree. Chapter 11. At the same time, the attackers were taking their prisoners through the forest. As the sun rose, the 2 leaders discussed their plans. Now you should leave us, Sir Maurice, the Templar said to de Bracy. Then you can come back and rescue Rowena from her attackers. I've changed my mind. I won't leave you until I have arrived at Torquilstone together with my prize, answered de Bracy. Then I will go to Lady Rowena and explain everything. I'm sure she will understand that I did this only because of my love for her. What made you change your plan, de Bracy? You don't believe me? Lady Rowena is very beautiful, but I have a prize among the prisoners who is as lovely as your own. It is the beautiful Jewess. I like both her money and herself. I'm afraid we will have to share her father's money with Front de Beauf. Soon they reached Torquilstone, the castle of Front de Beauf. As the Norman knights rode into the courtyard of the castle, the prisoners were separated and taken to different parts of the castle. Athelstane and Cedric were alone in one of the halls of Torquilstone. They were hungry but ready to fight with Front de Beauf anywhere and anytime. Suddenly they heard the sound of a horn in the distance. Cedric and Athelstane rushed to the window, but all they could see was the courtyard of the castle. At the same time, Isaac of York was taken down to the dark dungeon of Torquilstone. It was very cold and damp, because the dungeon was very deep. There were only 2 small holes at the top of the wall for air and light, a small fire burning in the far corner and some chains with 2 human leg bones inside the chains. He sat down in a corner. 3 hours later, Front de Beauf came to him. Isaac started to shake with horror. I want 1,000 pounds of silver, said Front de Beauf, or you will never be released from my dungeon. I am old and poor and helpless," exclaimed Isaac. "You may be old, but everyone knows that you are rich. If you refuse to bring me money, the guards will make you starve here." "Okay, I will pay," cried Isaac. "I will pay. I'll go and get the money in New York, but let the other prisoners go first." Number. "Can I at least take my wounded friend with me?" "No, Jew. Let my daughter go to York for me, then." "Your daughter?" asked Front de Beaulieu, surprised. "I didn't know she was your daughter." "I've already given her to the Templar." Isaac cried out loudly and grabbed the knees of Front de Beaulieu. "Take what you asked for, take 10 times more, but let me keep my daughter. I will not pay anything unless my daughter is safe." Just at that moment, they heard the sound of the horn in the distance. Voices from above called for Front de Beaulieu, and the knight with his guards went upstairs. Chapter 12. At the same time, de Bracy came to the room of Lady Rowena. He took off his gloves and large green hat and asked her to sit down beside him. "If I am your prisoner, Sir Knight, I prefer to stand up," answered Rowena. "Beautiful Rowena. You are not my prisoner, I am your prisoner. I have chosen you to be the queen of my heart. This is all because of your beauty. You will never leave this castle before you become my wife. When and if I get married, I will choose someone who does not hate the Saxon people like you do." "I know what you're thinking, Rowena. Don't dream that Richard the Lion-Hearted will return, or that Ivanhoe will marry you. Ivanhoe is here in the castle, in my power." "Wilfred, here? I don't believe you. Didn't you really know this?" "He was lying in the old Jew's litter. You know Front de Beaulieu will kill Ivanhoe if he finds him here, because Ivanhoe will want his land back. Then save him, for the love of heaven." Rowena started crying. "I can, and I promise I will. I will hide him from Front de Beaulieu," said de Bracy, "but then you must agree to become my wife. Remember that Cedric's life also depends on you." The distant sound of the horn interrupted him, and de Bracy rushed out of the room to find out what was happening. At the same time, Rebecca had been taken to a room in the highest tower of Torquilstone. She quickly saw that the room had only one, very large window, and that she could not escape. The door opened behind her, and a tall man dressed in green came in. She held out some of her jewelry to him, hoping that this was what he came for. "Beautiful flower of Palestine," said the outlaw in French, "I have always preferred beauty to jewelry." "You're not an outlaw, but a Norman," cried Rebecca. "And you are so beautiful, that people can think that you are a witch," said Brian de Bois Gilbert. "What do you want from me, except my money? You are a Christian and I am a Jewess. We could never marry." "Marry? Marry a Jewess?" The Templar laughed. "I cannot marry anyone. I am a Templar." He showed her the Templar's robe, which he wore under his green disguise. "If it is necessary, I will take what I want by force. But if you take my religion, you can have a life with the best knight of the Templars. Stand back. Take your religion? With you as the best knight, what kind of religion can that be?" As she spoke, Rebecca jumped up onto the windowsill and looked down into the courtyard far below. "God has given me a way to escape from this." The Templar was not prepared for this at all and had no time to stop her. "Come down," he said, "and I promise that I will not harm you." "I cannot trust you, Templar." "I promise by my sword, my name and my cross, I will not harm you." "If not yourself, then think of your father. He will need a powerful friend in this castle." "I will trust you, for now, but stay away from me." Rebecca kept her back to the window. "Let there be peace between us," said the Templar. "Don't be afraid." "I don't need to be afraid, as long as I have this window behind me." "You are very unfair to me, Rebecca," said the Templar. "Someone like you who is willing to die for her beliefs must have a proud and powerful soul, too. We belong together." "No, don't be afraid. It will only be if you agree, and on your own terms. I have my ambitions, and one day I may become the Grand Master of the Templars myself. Just think of what this could mean for us." "What are you saying?" Rebecca asked, confused. "Do you really think?" She was interrupted by the sound of the horn in the distance. "I must go now, Rebecca," said the Templar. "The others may need me." When the Templar left, Rebecca jumped down on the floor and thanked God for her life. Chapter 13. The Templar and Fabrice met in the tower corridor, and Front de Beaulieu came running up from the dungeon below. "Let's find out what is going on," Front de Beaulieu said. "I've been given this letter, but I can't read it, because it is in Saxon." "It could be magic spells," said de Bracy. "I never learned to read." "Give it to me," said the Templar. "What does it say?" asked de Bracy. The Templar translated the letter into French. "Me, Wamba, the son of Witless, jester of the noble Cedric of Rotherwood, known as the Saxon, and me, Girth, the son of Beowulf, the swineherd of Cedric, with the help of the good knight known as the Black Sluggard and the outlaw Locksley and his men, demand that our master Cedric the Saxon, Lady Rowena, Athelstane of Königsberg, Isaac of York, with his daughter, Rebecca, be delivered to us in an hour after receiving this letter. If you want to do this, we will attack and destroy your castle." At first, the knights couldn't speak, but then de Bracy burst out laughing. The Templar joined him, but Front de Beaulieu looked thoughtfully at them. "These men should have a lot of men with them," said Front de Beaulieu. He turned to one of his guards. "Have you seen how many men are gathered out there?" "There are at least 200 men." "Let's attack them," said the Templar. "I agree," said de Bracy. "Send for help," said the Templar to Front de Beaulieu. "Send a message to York," said de Bracy. "Sir Templar, write, please, a message to the outlaws for me," said Front de Beaulieu. Templar sat down and wrote, "Reginald Front de Beaulieu, with his noble allies, refuses to give the slaves to you. In the morning, we will execute them and place their heads on the castle walls." The letter was then handed to the Saxon messenger waiting outside the gate. In the forest outside Torquilstone, over 200 men gathered already and more were arriving every minute. The messenger passed through the growing crowd and gave the Templar's letter to Friar Tuck. "Execute the noble Cedric!" exclaimed Wamba, when the Black Knight had finished. "You must be mistaken, Sir Knight. I think, if they ask for a man of God, we should send the monk to see the castle from inside," said the knight. Friar Tuck refused loudly. Everyone looked at each other in silence. "I see," said Wamba, after a short pause. "The fool must be a fool and risk his neck when wise men refuse." Jester put on the monk's robe, and went to the castle. Chapter 14. When the Jester arrived to the gate of Torquilstone, the guard asked who he was. "I am a poor monk who has been asked to visit some prisoners in this castle," answered the Jester. The guard let Wamba through the gate. When the Jester was taken to Front de Beaulieu, he shook with fear. "Who are you, monk?" asked Front de Beaulieu. "I was traveling through the forest when I was taken a prisoner by outlaws. They sent me here to hear the confessions of some prisoner," answered the Jester. "Good," answered Front de Beaulieu. "Can you tell me how many outlaws are there?" "At least 500. "What?" said the Templar, who came in at that moment. "So many." He took Front de Beaulieu aside. "Do you know this monk?" "He is a stranger." "I don't know him." "Then don't tell him what the message you want him to carry is about. Let the monk see the prisoners, so that no one becomes suspicious." The guards first took the Jester into the hall where Cedric and Athelstane sat. "Come in," said Cedric and looked up at Wamba when he entered. "Why have you come, monk?" "To prepare you for your death." "That is impossible," replied Cedric and stared at the monk. "They would not dare to kill us." Then he became suspicious. "I know your voice." "It is your jester," answered Wamba, and pulled back the hood of his robe. "Put my robe on and leave the castle." "I will stay here in your place." "Leave you in my place?" exclaimed Cedric. "Why, they would hang you, my poor fool." "Save noble Athelstane instead, Wamba," said Cedric. "That is the duty of anyone who has Saxon blood in him." "No, I will hang only for my own master." "Go, then, noble Cedric," said Athelstane. "When you are outside, you may be able to help our friends rescue us." There were tears in Cedric's eyes as he put Wamba's robe on. "I will either save you or come back and die with you," said he to Wamba. Cedric hurried out of the hall. On his way across the courtyard, he met Front de Beaulieu. "Have you prepared them for their deaths, monk?" asked the Norman. "Yes, I found them expecting the worst." "Can you read, monk?" "Not a word." "Good. Take this letter to York. Say it comes from me and was written by the Templar, Brian de Bois Gilbert." Cedric agreed and walked out through the castle gate. Front de Beaulieu turned to one of his guards. "Now, bring me Cedric of Rotherwood and Athelstane of Koningsberg." Athelstane and Wamba were brought in. "What have we got here?" exclaimed Front de Beaulieu. "This is Cedric's jester." "This means that Cedric has escaped in the monk's robe," answered de Bracy as he walked in. At this time, the Templar came in. "Those men are very disciplined. They use the trees for protection from our arrows. I think their leader has attacked castles before. I see who it is. See the tall man in the black armor. That's the black sluggard, the one who knocked you down at the tournament, Front de Beaulieu," replied de Bracy. "Good. I will take care of that black knight myself," said Front de Beaulieu. Chapter 15. When de Bracy had left Rowena earlier, he ordered his men to take Ivanhoe to a safe place, as he had promised her. De Bracy's men took the wounded knight to Rebecca's tower room. Ivanhoe immediately recognized the young woman who was imprisoned there with him and cured his wounds herself after the tournament. "I see that we have been taken to the castle of Front de Beaulieu," said Ivanhoe. "How can I protect Rowena and my father now?" Rebecca told him that the castle was under attack from the outside. They could already hear the Norman knights shouting orders to their men in the yard below the tower. They heard the sound of armor and weapons being moved and the footsteps of men running to their places. Rebecca's face grew pale with fear, but Ivanhoe, who was used to battles, was impatient. If I could see what was happening. If I had a bow or a battle axe! Cried Ivanhoe. Don't worry, noble knight, answered Rebecca. Maybe there will be no battle after all. You don't understand these things, said Ivanhoe impatiently. That only means that all the men are in their places now and are ready to fight. If only I could come to the window. You will only make your wounds worse, noble knight. I will stand in the window and tell you what I see. Rebecca climbed up on the window sill. I can see the archers standing in the shadows of the trees at the edge of the forest. Who are they? I cannot tell. I can see a tall man in front wearing black armor. It's the Black Knight. They are preparing to attack now. God protect us, what a terrible sight. The cloud of arrows is so thick that I cannot even see the men who are shooting them, exclaimed Rebecca. But wait. I see the Black Knight with his men running forwards. Oh, Franz Beowulf and the Black Knight are fighting with each other now. He is down. He is down, she exclaimed. Who is down? Cried Ivanhoe. Tell me, who has fallen? The Black Knight. No, no. He is up again, and fighting with the strength of 20 men. His sword is broken, but he has grabbed a battle axe from someone else. He strikes Franz Beowulf, he falls, he falls. His men, led by the Templar, are taking him off. Now the attackers are trying to enter. The Black Knight is trying to break the gate with his battle axe. Stones and arrows are raining down on him, but he acts as if they were feathers. Ivanhoe raised up. I thought there was only one man in England who could do such a thing. The gate has been broken down by him. They are rushing in now. The Templar has destroyed the bridge. The Black Knight is still fighting. By the name of the lady I love, I would gladly be a prisoner for 10 years if I could just fight one day on the side of that good knight in this battle. Rebecca came down from the window and sat down next to Ivanhoe. You cannot fight because you are wounded. I think the attackers will rescue us. Chapter 16. After breaking the bridge, de Bracy and the Templar met to discuss their plans for the defense of the castle. He's still alive, said the Templar coolly, at least for a few hours more. How did the outlaws fight on your side of the castle? Like devils, answered de Bracy. They are led by that archer who won the prize at Ashby, and they have already killed a lot of my men. Let us defend the castle walls. answered the Templar, and they led their men to the top of the walls, where they waited for the next attack of the outlaws. At the same time, the outlaws cut down trees and built a floating bridge. "So, Locksley, take your archers to the other side of the castle and make it look as if our main attack is there. At the same time, we will use the bridge from this side." The bridge was put across the moat and the Black Knight with Cedric ran across it and reached the other side with the help of Locksley and his men. "All is lost," said the Templar. "The west side of the castle is burning behind us." "What should we do now?" asked de Bracy. "Take your men down and destroy the floating bridge. And I will try to attack the outlaws." De Bracy led his men down to the castle gate, but the Black Knight had already come through it. Black Knight knocked de Bracy off his feet. "Surrender, de Bracy," said the Black Knight, holding a knife against his helmet. "Surrender, rescue or no rescue. Otherwise you are a dead man." "I will not surrender to an unknown knight," replied de Bracy weakly. The Black Knight whispered something in de Bracy's ear. "I am your prisoner," de Bracy said to the Black Knight, "rescue or no rescue." "Then go and wait for my further orders," said the Black Knight. "Let me first tell you that Wilfred of Ivanhoe is wounded and a prisoner here. He will die in this burning castle if you do not help him." "Wilfred of Ivanhoe!" exclaimed the Black Knight. "A prisoner? Tell me where he is." Thick heavy smoke was already rolling into the tower room where Rebecca and Ivanhoe were imprisoned. At this moment, the door flew open and the Templar came in. He picked Rebecca up and carried her out of the room in his arms, leaving Ivanhoe shouting behind them. A few moments later, the Black Knight came into the room. He lifted Ivanhoe up, carried him out to some monks near the burning castle and went back to find the other prisoners. Cedric with Garth were looking for Rowena. When they found her, Cedric left her in the care of Garth and ran on to try to find Athelstane. Wamba and Athelstane had already made their escape and were standing in the yard of Torquilstone. Here they saw the Templar on his horse, surrounded by his Arab servants and defending Rebecca with his sword. Through the smoke, Athelstane saw a woman on a horse beside the Templar and thought it was Rowena. "I will rescue her from that knight, and he shall die by my sword." The Templar struck Athelstane on the head with his sword. He rode off into the forest, closely followed by his men. The fire over Torquilstone could be seen for miles around. Chapter 17. After the fight, the outlaws gathered at the old oak tree. "Let's not stay here long," said Locksley. "I am so upset. The noble Athelstane of Königsberg has died. Lady Rowena wishes to return to Rotherwood right now. I have only stayed here to thank you and your men for saving my life, said Cedric. He turned to his jester. How can I ever thank you? If you really want to reward me, forgive my friend Girth, who left you to become the servant of your son. Said Wamba. Forgive him! Exclaimed Cedric. I will both forgive him and reward him. You are now a free man, Girth, and I will give you some land. Girth jumped to his feet. Someone helps me to take this collar off. I will fight twice as bravely for you now. But you will forget me, said Wamba. I will never forget you, my true friend, answered Girth. They were interrupted by Lady Rowena with Cedric's men. Her face was pale and sad, as if Thulstein was dead, but also showed new hope for the future as she knew that Ivanhoe was safe. She thanked Locksley and his men for her rescue. Before leaving, Cedric turned to the Black Knight and shook his hand. Come to Rotherwood, not as a guest, but as a son or brother. I will come to Rotherwood someday, but I have more important things to do right now, answered the Knight de Bracy. The Black Knight said to de Bracy, you are a free man, so leave England now. De Bracy bowed and disappeared into the forest. Locksley gave the Black Knight a horn. Noble knight, if you are ever in danger in this forest, blow this horn and my men will come and help you. The Black Knight took the horn and thanked Locksley for it. Suddenly Friar Tuck appeared with Isaac tied to the end of a rope. We found another monk in the forest, said Locksley. It was Prior Aymer. Prior Aymer looked at the monk. Please let me know how I can escape from these men. You will have to pay us to be released, just like this Jew, said Locksley. God help me! Exclaimed Isaac. Oh, I'll give everything to know that my daughter Rebecca is still alive. I saw her. She was carried off by the Templar, exclaimed one of the outlaws. Friends, said Locksley, looking around, this old man's sorrow has touched me. Isaac, take your money and see if you can buy back your child from the Templar. I cannot help you myself. Let the prior write a letter to Boyce Gilbert for you to take with you to Templestowe, the Templars' castle. The prior wrote a short letter to the Templar and gave it to Isaac. The prior was then allowed to leave, and Isaac set off for Templestowe with the letter. The Black Knight, who had been watching all this with interest, announced that it was time for him to leave. Sir Knight, said Locksley, we each have our secrets still. Next time we'll meet without our secrets. Goodbye, brave outlaw, said the Black Knight. He rode into the forest, taking Wamba and Girth with him. Chapter 18. At the Castle of York, Prince John met with those who were going to help him to take the throne of England from his brother. Front de Beaulieu, de Bracy and Boys Gilbert were missing. Isaac of York, from whom they were going to borrow money they needed for an army, also disappeared. On the morning after the fall of Torquilstone, rumors reached Prince John that the 3 Norman knights had been either killed or taken prisoners. Then de Bracy arrived to see Prince John. "De Bracy," exclaimed Prince John, "what has happened? Speak. Are the Saxons rebelling against us? Where is the Templar? Where is Front de Beaulieu?" "The Templar has gone to Templestowe," said de Bracy, "and Front de Beaulieu is dead. I alone have escaped to come and tell you this. Richard is in England, and I have seen and spoken to him. There were only some outlaws with him, and even they don't know who he is. He only joined them to help them attack Torquilstone." "What are you going to do?" asked Fitzurse. I am going to France right now." Prince John ordered Fitzurse to take his men and find the king. "They are going to take my brother prisoner," he said to de Bracy, when Fitzurse had left. "And I hope they will show proper respect for the life of dear Richard." De Bracy only answered with a smile, and left. Chapter 19. The Grand Master of the Templars, Lucas de Beaumanoir, had come from Palestine and arrived suddenly at Templestowe. He had decided to come and see things for himself as he had heard rumors that the Templars were only drinking, hunting and fighting in England. The Grand Master was a thin old man with a long grey beard, but he still had the spirit of a fighter in him. A servant came in. "There is a Jew standing at the gate who wants to speak to Brother Brian the Boys Gilbert." "Let him in." Isaac came in and bowed deeply to the Grand Master. Then he looked at the Grand Master with great fear. "What do you want from our brother Brian de Boys Gilbert?" asked the Grand Master. "I have a letter from Prior Aymer for him." "Give me the letter," demanded the Grand Master. The servant took the letter from Isaac and gave it to the Grand Master. He read the letter quickly, and was surprised and even scared. "Read it aloud," he said, and gave the letter to his servant. "Prior Aymer to Brian de Boys Gilbert," read the servant. "I am a prisoner in the hands of some lawless and godless men. From them I have heard of Front de Beaulieu's death and of your own escape to Templestowe together with that Jewish witch, whose beautiful eyes have cast a spell on you. I am happy to hear that you are safe, but warn you that the Grand Master is on his way to England to see you. As for the rich Jew who brought you this letter and is the father of the Jewess, make him pay you to get his daughter back, so we can enjoy ourselves with the money later. Don't forget to bring your wine cup. Will we meet again, Prior Aymer?" "What does he mean by saying that she is a witch?" asked the Grand Master. "Is your daughter, famous for healing wounds, a prisoner of Brian de Bois Guilbert?" "Yes, sir," said Isaac, proudly, "and many men use her great skills of healing." "Ah, false Jew," said the Grand Master, "then she is a witch. I will teach her to cast spells on my Templars. Tomorrow we will have a trial here at Templestowe. If she really is a witch, she will be burned." Bois Guilbert was going around his room angrily. "Rebecca," said Bois Guilbert to himself, "why can't I leave you? But beware, Rebecca, I will not risk my life and honor if you refuse me again." The trial of Rebecca began the next day at noon in the great hall of Templestowe. One by one, people from the neighboring villages came forward and said they had seen Rebecca heal the sick and wounded with magic spells. The young Templars looked at each other and knew that their brother Brian had been a victim of Rebecca's beauty rather than of her magic spells. "Rebecca, have you got anything to say to this?" demanded the Grand Master. "I am innocent. I demand a trial by a champion fight for my innocence." "We can refuse this woman her right to a trial by combat," said the Grand Master, looking around. "Brian de Bois Guilbert will fight against her champion for us. Rebecca, you have 3 days to find yourself a champion. The trial by combat will be right here, outside Templestowe. Rebecca, if you wouldn't find a champion for yourself in time, you will die the death of a witch." Rebecca didn't speak, but folded her hands and looked up to heaven. Then she quickly wrote a message on a piece of paper and gave it to one of the servants. "Find Isaac of York as fast as you can and give him this message." Chapter 20. After the trial, Brian de Bois Guilbert knocked at the door and entered to Rebecca's room at Templestowe. When she saw the Templar, Rebecca ran to the corner of the room. "You have no reason to be afraid of me, Rebecca," the Templar said. "I am sorry this has happened. I didn't want it. I was only trying to save your life. If you were really trying to protect the innocent, I would thank you." "Your words are bitter," said Bois Guilbert, walking around her room, "but I haven't come to argue with you. I wanted to be your champion, but that old fool forced me to fight against your champion instead." "Listen, Rebecca," said the knight, coming closer to her, "if I go and fight in the lists, you will surely die. Ivanhoe is not strong enough to fight for you, and Richard is in a foreign prison." "Rebecca," he threw himself at her feet, "I will give up everything and not appear in the lists, if you will only say that you love me. Save me from this terrible death without asking for something from me in return, Sir Knight," said Rebecca. "No," said the Templar, rising to his feet. I need only your love. We can escape together. Listen to me, Rebecca, he added softly, England, Europe, is not the world. I have friends in Palestine. We can go there together. A dream, replied Rebecca. Go and find King Richard instead. He will help me. Never, Rebecca, said the templar angrily. If you refuse my love, I will not help you. Ask Richard for help. Never, Rebecca. Farewell. Chapter 21. When the Black Knight left the outlaws, he rode to Ivanhoe to discuss some important things. Then the Black Knight sent messengers in all directions. We will meet again, the Black Knight said to Ivanhoe as he got up to leave, at Königsberg, the castle of the dead Athelstane, where your father will be arranging his funeral. I want to come with you, cried Ivanhoe. Rest today, Wilfred, otherwise you won't have the strength to travel tomorrow. I will take Wamba as my guide. I fear you have chosen a talkative fool to be your guide. But he knows every road in this forest. Ivanhoe kissed the knight's hand. As soon as the Black Knight had left, Ivanhoe together with Gurth went after the Black Knight and Wamba. On their way through the forest, Wamba and the Black Knight sang happily, and the knight wished Friar Tuck could hear their songs. Sir Knight, some men are watching us from among the trees. If they were friends, they would join us on the road, said Wamba at that moment. 3 arrows hit the helmet of the Black Knight. The men, that Wamba had seen, rushed forward and attacked the knight from all sides with their swords, shouting, Die! A knight in blue armor rode out from behind them and wounded the Black Knight's horse with his lance. The Black Knight fell to the ground and got up to continue fighting on foot. Wamba quickly took Locksley's horn and blew it very strongly. The Blue Knight had already forced the Black Knight up against a tree and was trying to kill him with his lance, when suddenly Locksley and Friar Tuck appeared with a group of outlaws. Within a few minutes, most of the attackers lay dead or wounded on the ground. Wamba ran up to the Blue Knight, who lay under his fallen horse, and pulled his helmet off. Valdemar Fitzurse, said the Black Knight, surprised. Who made you do this? Richard, your own brother, answered Fitzurse looking up at him. An angry look crossed the Black Knight's face, but he calmed himself down again. I will let you live if you leave England and go back to your Norman castle within 3 days. The outlaws immediately fell on their knees in front of the king and asked him to forgive them for their crimes. Rise, my friends, said the king, looking down at them. Your crimes are forgiven as you helped me at Torquilstone and here in the forest today. And you, brave Locksley. Don't call me Locksley any longer, my lord. Use the name Robin Hood of Sherwood Forest. Wamba, I won't forget your good service, said the king. Chapter 22. At that moment, two horsemen arrived. One was Ivanhoe on the prior's horse, and the other was Gurth on Ivanhoe's war horse. Ivanhoe was surprised to see the group of outlaws, 6 or 7 dead bodies on the ground and the king without his helmet. Don't be afraid, Wilfred, to call me Richard in the company of these true English hearts, said the king. Traitors have been with us, Wilfred, added he, but thanks to these brave men, those traitors have met their deaths. But why, noble king, do you risk your life on lonely journeys and dangerous adventures? Said Ivanhoe. Richard is prouder to fight when he only has his good sword, said the king, than when he leads an army of 100,000 men into battle. He turned to Robin Hood. King of Outlaws, do you have food and drink for your friend king? A meal was quickly prepared beneath a nearby oak tree. All were happily eating and drinking with Richard. We are happy in the presence of our king, Robin Hood said to Ivanhoe, but we don't want him to be late, if the kingdom is in danger. Well spoken, brave Robin Hood, said Ivanhoe. Wilfred is impatient, said Richard, and decided it was time for them to leave. Robin Hood gave the king his hand, and Richard promised to help him in future, if he ever needed the king's help. At last, Ivanhoe, Wamba and Gurth set off with the king towards the castle of Koningsberg. Chapter 23. A large black flag was flying over the highest tower of the castle of Koningsberg. The funeral guests ate and drank, and priests read out prayers. Gurth and Wamba quickly joined the guests in the yard, and King Richard and Ivanhoe went inside the tower. Ivanhoe covered his face and stayed behind the king as they entered the main hall of the castle. Here Cedric sat at the head of the table with members of other important Saxon families. The knight and Ivanhoe followed Cedric to a small chapel in the castle, where they prayed for the soul of Ithilstein. Lady Rowena came in with some other guests and they sang a funeral song together. The old Saxon was about to leave the chapel again, when the Black Knight took his hand. I would like to remind you, the knight said, that you promised me a favor. Of course, noble knight, said Cedric. I'm afraid I don't have much time. You have known me as the Black Knight, said the knight, taking off his helmet, now you may know me as Richard. King Richard! Exclaimed Cedric with surprise. And now for the favor, said the king. I ask you to forgive this good knight, Wilfred of Ivanhoe. My father! Cried Ivanhoe, throwing himself at Cedric's feet. Please forgive me. You are forgiven, my son, said Cedric. I always keep my promise and I know what you are going to say, but Lady Rowena must mourn for Athelstane for 2 years. At Cedric's words, the doors flew open, and Athelstane came in. Cedric stared open-mouthed at the ghost. "In the name of God," said Cedric, "alive or dead, noble Athelstane, speak to Cedric." "I will," said the ghost, very calmly. "I am alive." "Why, noble Athelstane," said the king, "I myself saw you fell down by the Templar." The Templar's sword had turned in his hand, and so he struck me with the flat side of his sword and I fell down. Then I was taken to the local church, not far from here, and have fallen asleep. After that I came to you, my noble friend," said Athelstane. "And you have found me," said Cedric. "I am so happy." "Noble Athelstane, look here," said Cedric, "this is the noble King Richard with my son Ivanhoe. He asks if you want to be with the Lady Rowena." "Cedric," said Athelstane, "be reasonable. The Lady Rowena does not care for me." "Hey! Wilfred has disappeared." "But I am sure he was just here." "Everyone looked for Ivanhoe, but he was gone. They found out that an old Jew had come to Koningsberg to talk to Ivanhoe. King Richard had gone to find the old Jew and together they went after Ivanhoe and Gurth. Come my friends, those of you who are left, and we will go to the great hall and eat before anyone else disappears." Chapter 24. A great crowd of people came to Templestowe to see the trial by combat. All hoped to see the Grand Master, the Witch and the Templar. At last, the Grand Master, Boys Gilbert with his Arab servants, the other Templars of Templestowe and their servants rode from the castle. Then came a group of guards on foot and the small woman figure. All the Templars except Boys Gilbert got off their horses and took their places in front of the galleries. Rebecca was taken to a wooden chair. "It can be burned." The trumpets played and a herald came forward into the lists. "Here stands the good knight, Sir Brian de Boys Gilbert," shouted the herald, "ready to fight against any knight who will be the champion of the Jewess." The trumpets played again and then there was silence for many minutes as the crowd looked around for the champion. "We'll wait for a champion until evening," said the Grand Master. "If this day passes without the arrival of a champion, then she will die." Everyone waited for 2 hours. When the crowd was sure that no one would come to defend a Jewess, 2 riders appeared in a distance. "A champion!" exclaimed the crowd as a knight rode into the lists. But then they saw how tired his horse looked, and how hardly the knight could keep himself in the saddle. The herald asked the knight to give his name. "My name is Wilfred of Ivanhoe, I have come to defend this lady, the daughter of Isaac of York, with my lance and my sword," said the knight, taking off his helmet. "Do you accept me as a champion?" Ivanhoe asked Rebecca. "I do accept you as the champion sent to me by heaven," she exclaimed. Ivanhoe rode to one end of the lists, where he put his helmet on and raised his lance. Boys Gilbert slowly did the same at the other end. All people saw that his face, that was pale earlier, suddenly became very red. Seeing that each knight was in his place, the herald announced the beginning of the fight. The knights galloped towards each other. The tired horse of Ivanhoe went down by the lance of the Templar. But to everybody's surprise, the Templar also fell to the ground. Ivanhoe, getting up from his wounded horse, placed his sword on the Templar's throat. He ordered him to surrender or die. Boys Gilbert did not answer. Boys Gilbert's helmet was removed. The crowd saw that the Templar was dead. "This is indeed the judgment of God," said the Grand Master, turning his eyes up to heaven. "I declare this young woman to be innocent." As the Grand Master spoke, everybody saw a large army of men coming. "I am too late," said the Black Knight, looking around. "I was going to fight with Boys Gilbert." The Grand Master gathered the Templars and they rode away from the lists into the forest. Rebecca wanted to thank Ivanhoe but was afraid to tell him about her feelings. So, she left the Templestowe with her old father. The crowd shouted, "Long live Richard with the lion's heart!" "What is heard from York?" Ivanhoe asked the knight. "Our enemies are already leaving the country," said the knight, "and we heard the news from John himself." "Didn't Richard put him in prison?" exclaimed Ivanhoe. "No, he ordered him to go back to their mother and stay there for a while." Ivanhoe was surprised. "Let us return to York," said the knight. "Richard will be punishing the traitors he has found, even though he has forgiven their leader." Chapter 25. Many Norman noblemen were executed by the orders of the king. The king also ordered Cedric to come to York to help him get Saxon support there. Cedric came to York and, in a few days, he finally agreed to the marriage of Lady Rowena with Ivanhoe. He was secretly very proud of his son's adventures and he soon became good friends with the king. The wedding of Ivanhoe and Rowena was held in York a few days later, and it was attended by a large number of Saxons and Normans, including the king himself. Everyone was happy that peace had finally returned to England. The next morning, a young woman had come to see Lady Rowena. The stranger threw herself at her feet and kissed her dress. "What does this mean?" asked Rowena. "Why are you doing this?" "Because to you, Lady of Ivanhoe," replied Rebecca, getting up, "I can show how grateful I am to Wilfred of Ivanhoe." I am the unhappy Jewess for whom your husband risked his life in the lists at Templestowe." "Rebecca," said Rowena, "on that day, Wilfred only paid you for healing his wounds. Speak, is there anything I can do for you?" "Nothing," said Rebecca, calmly, "unless you will say goodbye to him for me." "Are you leaving England?" asked Rowena. "My father has a brother in Spain. We will go there for peace and protection." "Please accept this gift from me," asked Rebecca. She gave Rowena a small box. Rowena opened the box and saw that it was filled with beautiful jewelers. "It is impossible," she exclaimed. "I cannot accept such a valuable gift." "You keep it, my lady," said Rebecca. "Accept it, to me it has no value any more. I will never wear jewelry again." She quickly left the room. When the beautiful Saxon later told her husband about the meeting, it made a deep impression on him. Ivanhoe went on to live a long and happy life together with Rowena, and they had always loved each other. But she was sometimes upset because the memory of Rebecca's beauty and kindness often came to Ivanhoe's mind.